The Nexus Combat Academy perched on the rim of a dead volcano, like some architect's fever dream of intimidation. Carved from obsidian and reinforced with materials that could withstand planetary bombardment, it housed the galaxy's most lethal specimens. 300 cadets from 47 different apex predator species, all gathered to prove who deserved the title of Ultimate Warrior. And then there was Kess. She stood barely chest-high to most of her classmates, her pale skin almost translucent under the harsh training lights. While Vorthak warriors sharpened their bone spurs and Zephyrian crystals hummed with stored energy, she adjusted the straps on her standard-issue training gear with the same careful attention one might give to organizing office supplies. Thoroughly unremarkable, if you ignored the fact that she shouldn't have been there at all. "Look at that," rumbled Thaxor, a Vorthak whose shoulders could have doubled as landing platforms. His mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his kind. Over 97% of viewers here are watching without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the journey. Every click helps us grow stronger, and you'll never miss the next epic story. The diplomatic species brought a representative. The comment drew chuckles from nearby cadets. A trio of saurian pack hunters exchanged glances, their reptilian faces splitting into predatory grins. The Corvani twins, 8 feet of engineered muscle and redundant organs, simply stared at Kess like she was a particularly interesting insect. Kess said nothing. She never said much of anything, really. Just stood there with that blank expression, absorbing insults like a particularly efficient sponge. "Hey, tiny thing," called out Vex, the lead saurian. "You sure you're in the right building? The diplomatic corps is 3 sectors over." More laughter. Even some of the instructors seemed to find it amusing, though they maintained the professional neutrality required of their positions. All except Instructor Corvesh, a scarred Thanatari whose species had earned their reputation by being too violent for regular military service. He watched Kess with the kind of attention usually reserved for unexploded ordnance. "Perhaps," suggested Zara 9, her crystalline form refracting the overhead lights into rainbow patterns. "The human is here for cultural exchange, to learn how real warriors conduct themselves." The Zephyrian's tone carried the particular condescension that came from being composed entirely of living mineral. Hard to feel threatened by organic meat when you were essentially a walking gemstone with delusions of grandeur. Kess finally looked up from her equipment check. Her eyes, a rather ordinary brown, swept across the assembled predators with the same casual interest one might show a mildly entertaining holodrama. "Fascinating hypothesis," she said, her voice barely carrying across the training floor. "Though I suspect the cultural exchange might flow in the opposite direction." The comment was so quiet, so unremarkable, that half the cadets missed it entirely. Those who heard it dismissed it as the desperate bravado of someone clearly out of their depth. Thaxor's bone spurs extended slightly. In Vorthak body language, it was roughly equivalent to rolling one's eyes. "Oh, the little meat thinks it has something to teach us. How delightful." "Combat positions," barked Instructor Corvesh, apparently deciding that enough entertainment had been extracted from the situation. "Today we practice capture and subdue protocols. Partners will be assigned randomly." The randomization was, naturally, anything but. Combat academies had their own social hierarchies, and everyone understood that certain pairings would be educational, while others would simply be messy. When the holographic display announced that Kess would be sparring with Vex, the training floor fell silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then the laughter started. "This should be brief," commented one of the Corvani twins. "Perhaps we should have medical standing by," suggested the other. Vex stretched his considerable frame, joints popping like gunshots. 7 feet of scaled muscle and predatory instinct, he'd already racked up an impressive collection of victories against supposedly superior opponents. Adding a human to his trophy case would barely qualify as a warm-up. "Try not to break too quickly, little diplomat," he said, fangs glinting. "I want to savor this." Kess nodded politely, as if he'd just offered her directions to the nearest rest facility. The sparring circle was 20 meters across, marked with energy barriers that would contain most forms of violence while allowing spectators a clear view. Standard academy procedure called for submission holds, knockout protocols, or ring-out victories. Lethal force was strictly prohibited, though accidents did happen with distressing regularity. Instructor Korvesh raised his hand. "Combat parameters are standard subdual. Victory conditions include submission, unconsciousness, or displacement from the circle. Begin." Vex moved like liquid death, covering half the distance between them in a single bound. His species had perfected the art of overwhelming prey through sheer physical dominance, and he saw no reason to deviate from a successful strategy. Kess stepped sideways. Not gracefully, not with the fluid precision that marked true martial artists. She simply moved, as if avoiding a puddle on a sidewalk, and Vex's claws raked empty air where her head had been. He landed, pivoted, struck again. Kess wasn't there. She'd moved again, that same casual sidestep, and was now standing 3 feet to his left with her hands clasped behind her back. "Interesting opening," she observed. "Very direct." Vex snarled and launched into a more complex attack pattern. Feint high, strike low, follow with a tail sweep designed to take her legs out from under her. It was a combination that had flattened Thanatari berserkers and left Korvani warriors gasping for breath. Kess avoided all of it, not through superior speed or reflexes, but with an almost supernatural ability to simply not be where the attacks were landing. She moved like someone who'd had the choreography memorized years in advance. The crowd's laughter died as Vex's frustration mounted. This wasn't supposed to be difficult. Humans were notorious for their diplomatic nature, their preference for negotiation over violence. They were support staff, technical specialists, bureaucrats. They were not supposed to make apex predators look foolish in front of their peers. "Stand still and fight," Vex hissed, his earlier confidence cracking around the edges. "I am fighting," Kess replied, stepping around another combination as if she were navigating a particularly crowded market. "This is what it looks like when my species engages in combat." That drew a snort from Thaxor. "Your species engages by running away and filing complaints." Kess finally stopped moving. She stood in the center of the circle, hands still clasped behind her back, and fixed Thaxor with that bland stare. "My species," she said, her voice still barely above a whisper, "survived an ice age, global plagues, world wars, and nuclear annihilation before we figured out how to leave our planet. We did this not by being the strongest, or the fastest, or the most heavily armed." She paused, tilting her head slightly. "We did it by being very, very good at killing things that thought they were better than us." The training floor had gone completely quiet. Even Vex had stopped his attacks, caught off guard by the sudden shift in her demeanor. "Your move," Kess said. What happened next would be debated in Academy records for years to come. Vex, pride wounded and audience watching, abandoned all pretense of technique and simply charged, 7 feet and 400 pounds of apex predator, moving with the kind of desperate fury that had conquered worlds. Kess moved to meet him. Not sideways this time, not avoiding or deflecting. She stepped forward into his attack and did something so fast that the spectator's eyes couldn't quite track the motion. Vex hit the energy barrier at the edge of the circle hard enough to crack the reinforced floor beneath it. He slid down the barrier's surface like a broken toy, unconscious before he reached the ground. Kess brushed imaginary dust from her uniform and walked back to her position in formation. Medical to training floor 7, announced Instructor Corvesh, though his eyes never left the small human who'd just done something that shouldn't have been possible. The other cadets stared in stunned silence. Apex predators didn't get flattened by diplomatic species. It violated several fundamental assumptions about how the universe was supposed to work. Kess resumed her equipment check, as if nothing had happened. "Interesting cultural exchange," she murmured, too quietly for anyone but the instructors to hear. And in that moment, Instructor Corvish realized that the Nexus Combat Academy had just made what might very well be the last mistake of its institutional existence point. The culling approached like a storm front, inevitable, destructive, and deeply anticipated by those foolish enough to think themselves immune to its effects. Every 3 cycles, the Academy's finest specimens competed for the singular honor of being declared the galaxy's premier warrior. Winners received commissions in the hegemony's elite forces, political influence that spanned star systems, and breeding rights that ensured their genetic legacy. Losers received medical treatment and therapy to cope with their newfound irrelevance. "Have you reviewed the human's psychological profile?" Director Malthorn asked, her segmented fingers dancing across holographic displays. The Arachnari administrator had overseen 17 cullings, and her compound eyes had witnessed enough violence to populate a small war. Instructor Corvesh's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. The profile lists her as psychologically stable with minor introversion tendencies. Rather underwhelming for someone who just compressed Vex's spine into origami. Curious how Human Central Command insisted on her placement here. Malthorn's multiple eyes focused independently, creating the disconcerting impression of being examined by several different creatures simultaneously. Their diplomatic corps typically sends cultural attachés, not combat candidates. Perhaps they're expanding their definition of diplomacy. The conversation would have continued, but a commotion in the observation deck drew their attention. Through the reinforced transparent aluminum, they could see clusters of cadets engaged in what passed for casual discussion among apex predators, which was to say, barely controlled aggressive posturing with occasional threats of violence. "She doesn't even look like she lifts," Zara9 was saying, her crystalline form refracting afternoon light into prismatic patterns across the deck. "I've seen more muscle definition on administrative drones. Rentok, a Corvani whose genetic modifications included redundant cardiovascular systems and reinforced skeletal structure, flexed experimentally. Perhaps she utilized some form of technological enhancement. Humans are known for their creative interpretations of natural capability." "Impossible," countered Jekhai, whose Thanatari heritage granted him intimate familiarity with violence in all its forms. Academy sensors would detect any augmentation beyond baseline species norms. The meat is unmodified. Thaxor scraped one bone spur against another, producing a sound like grinding stone. "Then explain how something that weighs less than my breakfast managed to launch Vex into a wall." The question hung in the recycled atmosphere, like an accusation. 37 different species of apex predator, each one confident in their evolutionary superiority, had just witnessed their fundamental assumptions challenged by a creature that should, by all reasonable metrics, have been someone's lunch. "Leverage," suggested Kira 7, whose species had achieved interstellar flight through mathematical precision rather than brute force. Basic physics applied with exceptional timing. "Physics doesn't account for the speed differential," Rentok objected. "I've reviewed the recordings. Her movement velocity exceeded any previously documented human capability." "Maybe," said a voice that could have cut glass. "You've been documenting the wrong humans." The cadets turned to find Kess ascending the observation deck stairs, her expression as neutral as ever. She'd apparently finished her post-training medical clearance and equipment maintenance with the same methodical thoroughness she applied to everything else. "Enlighten us," Thaxor rumbled, his earlier amusement replaced by something approaching genuine curiosity. "What exactly have we been missing about your species?" Kess paused at the deck's apex, surveying the assembled predators with that bland stare that somehow managed to be more unsettling than open hostility. "You've been studying our diplomats," she said, "our scientists, our administrators and cultural representatives, the humans who wanted to leave Earth and explore the galaxy." She clasped her hands behind her back in what had become her signature pose. "You haven't been studying the ones who stayed behind. And why would we?" Zara 9's tone carried the particular condescension that only crystalline beings could properly achieve. What could a primitive planetary population possibly teach advanced interstellar civilizations? How to die efficiently, mostly. The statement was delivered with such casual indifference that several cadets initially missed its implications. When understanding dawned, the observation deck fell silent except for the ambient hum of environmental systems. Jekai leaned forward, his predatory instincts engaging despite himself. "You're claiming that Earth's remaining population is, what? More dangerous than your spacefaring representatives?" "Not claiming. Observing." Kess gestured vaguely in the direction of the planet below. "Every human who left Earth did so because they preferred exploration to conquest, discovery to destruction. We're the ones who thought the universe might be more interesting than our homeworld." She paused, considering. "We were wrong about several things." The implications settled over the assembled predators like a particularly toxic atmosphere. If the humans they'd encountered, scientists, diplomats, traders, represented the peaceful segment of the species, then what remained on Earth? "How many humans are still on your homeworld?" Rentok asked, his enhanced physiology allowing him to process the disturbing mathematics more quickly than his companions. "Approximately 11 billion. The number hung in the air like an unexploded munition. 11 billion members of a species that had just demonstrated an alarming capacity for violence, all concentrated on a single world that most galactic powers considered beneath notice. Your people conquered their own planet, Malthorn observed, having approached from the administrative levels with characteristic Arachnari stealth. Standard evolutionary development for apex species. Conquered implies opposition. Kess turned that unsettling stare on the Academy director. We simply eliminated everything that represented competition. Other apex predators, potential rival species, inconvenient geographical obstacles. She tilted her head slightly. Eventually, we got bored and started eliminating each other. And yet you achieved interstellar flight, Zara 9 pointed out. Clearly your species managed some form of cooperation. After we'd finished shooting at each other, certainly. Turns out that building starships requires focusing on external targets. Kess smiled, and for the first time since her arrival at the Academy, the expression contained something approaching genuine warmth. Lucky for everyone involved that we found some. The observation deck's environmental systems seemed inadequate suddenly, recycling air that had grown thick with implications. 37 species of apex predator, each one confident in their evolutionary advantages, had just learned that they might not represent the galaxy's most dangerous inhabitants after all. "The culling begins in 4 days, Malthorn announced, her multiple eyes tracking Kess with newfound interest. All cadets are required to submit final preparations and equipment requisitions." "Unnecessary," Kess replied. "I brought everything required." "And what?" Thaxor inquired, with the particular emphasis his species reserved for fundamental questions. "Did you bring?" Kess descended the stairs with the same methodical pace she applied to everything else, leaving the assembled predators to contemplate her response. Myself. The tournament brackets were published that evening, displayed on holographic matrices throughout the Academy complex. 297 cadets, arranged in a single elimination format that would culminate in individual combat between the galaxy's two finest specimens. Every single participant had requested Kess as their first-round opponent. Director Malthorn stared at the unprecedented data, her compound eyes processing information that challenged several fundamental assumptions about Academy procedures. They want to eliminate the perceived weakness early, Instructor Corvesh observed. Standard pack hunting behavior. Or, Malthorn replied, they're about to learn why Earth's population never felt the need to leave home. The culling arena occupied the Academy's central hub, a perfect sphere suspended within gravitational dampeners that could accommodate any combat environment the galaxy might produce. Today's configuration favored classical brutality, reinforced flooring, standard atmosphere, and enough space for several hundred apex predators to demonstrate why their species deserved galactic dominance. Kess entered through Portal 7, her equipment unchanged from daily training. Standard-issue Academy gear, no modifications, no enhancements beyond basic protective padding. She looked like someone preparing for an afternoon jog, rather than single combat against creatures evolved specifically for killing. Her first opponent, Grixtal of the Hegemony Shock Corps, stood 9 feet of chitinous armor and redundant nervous systems. His species had developed on a world where everything tried to eat everything else, producing predators so efficient that they'd achieved interstellar flight primarily to find new things to hunt. Finally, Grixtal's vocalizations translated through the arena's linguistic processors. I get to see what the little anomaly actually does when properly motivated. The comment drew appreciative sounds from the spectator galleries. 300 cadets and 50 instructors, all eager to witness the systematic dismantling of an obvious mistake in Academy admissions. The betting pools had closed after achieving ratios that would have been mathematically impossible under different circumstances. Kess stretched her shoulders, rolling her neck with the casual indifference of someone working out minor stiffness. Your species achieved spaceflight through conquest, correct? She asked, her voice carrying clearly across the arena, despite its conversational tone. Grixtal's compound eyes focused with predatory intensity. We claimed our rightful place among the stars through superior evolutionary development. Fascinating approach. Kess began walking a slow circle around the arena's perimeter, her pace suggesting a leisurely stroll rather than combat preparation. Tell me, how many worlds has your species successfully conquered since achieving interstellar capability? The question drew confused murmurs from the galleries. This wasn't typical pre-combat banter, which usually consisted of threats, intimidation displays, and increasingly creative descriptions of impending violence. 17 systems bow to hegemony authority, Grixtal replied, his natural weapons extending as confusion gave way to irritation. Impressive. Kess completed her circuit, stopping precisely where she'd begun. My species conquered one world, population, roughly 12 billion sentient organisms, plus several trillion sub-sapient life forms. She clasped her hands behind her back. It took us about 6,000 years. One world. Grixtal's mandibles clicked dismissively. Your species lacks the vision for proper expansion. Perhaps, though I should mention that the 12 billion sentients were all human. The arena fell silent as the implication processed through various neural networks. One world, one species, 6,000 years of continuous internecine warfare, culminating in a planetary population that had spent millennia perfecting the art of killing its own kind. Combat initiated without formal announcement. Grixtal simply moved, covering the distance between them in 3 bounds that would have impressed physics instructors throughout the academy. His natural weapons, bone spikes, reinforced claws, and acid glands, engaged with the fluid precision that marked a true apex predator. Kess stepped into his attack. Not around it, not away from it. Directly forward, as if embracing the violence rushing toward her. What followed happened too quickly for most spectators to process, but the Academy's high-speed recording systems captured every detail for later analysis. Grixtal's primary strike, a thrust designed to penetrate reinforced armor, met empty air where Kess had been standing. She'd moved beneath his attack arc, her trajectory calculated to bring her within his defensive perimeter at precisely the moment his momentum committed him to the strike. Her counterattack consisted of 3 movements executed in sequence, so rapid they appeared simultaneous. Palm strike to a joint cluster that anatomy instructors would later identify as hegemony equivalent of a solar plexus. Elbow to a nerve junction that controlled his species' balance centers. Knee to a cartilage structure that, when properly compressed, induced immediate unconsciousness. Grixtal dropped like architectural debris. The arena remained silent as medical personnel removed her first opponent. Kess returned to her starting position and resumed her equipment check, apparently unmoved by having just incapacitated a creature that could have torn through bulkhead plating. "Next," she called, her tone suggesting mild impatience with the proceedings. Her second opponent, a Corvani berserker whose genetic modifications included pain suppressors and enhanced rage responses, lasted approximately 15 seconds longer. Her third, a crystalline Zephyrian whose mineral composition should have made her nearly invulnerable to physical damage, required 2 strikes instead of 3. By the 7th match, the spectator galleries had grown restless. This wasn't combat. It was systematic deconstruction of the galaxy's finest specimens by something that shouldn't have been capable of threatening a maintenance drone. "Someone explain to me," demanded Colonel Vashiti, whose Thanatari military credentials included successful campaigns against 3 different apex predator species. "How a diplomatic species is dismantling our best cadets like defective equipment." Director Malthorne's compound eyes tracked Kess as she faced her 8th opponent, a Saurian pack leader whose hunting strategies had been refined over millions of years of evolutionary pressure. "She's not fighting them," Malthorne observed. "She's processing them." "Explain." "Watch her movements. No wasted energy, no emotional investment, no variation in technique based on opponent capabilities." Malthorne's segmented fingers manipulated holographic displays, highlighting tactical analyses that the Academy's combat computers had been generating throughout the matches. She identifies structural weaknesses in their biology, calculates optimal force application, and executes with mechanical precision. The Saurian lasted 18 seconds, which represented a significant improvement over his predecessors. His pack-hunting instincts allowed him to recognize predatory behavior patterns, though this knowledge proved insufficient when facing something that operated according to entirely different principles. "She's treating them like problems to be solved," Colonel Vashati realized, his professional appreciation for efficient violence warring with species pride. "Not opponents to be defeated." "Precisely, and she's already solved them." Kess's 9th opponent was Thaxor himself, the Vorthak who'd provided such entertaining commentary during earlier training sessions. His bone spurs extended to full combat length as he entered the arena, confidence backed by 4 successful culling victories and military service that spanned 2 stellar conflicts. "Let's discover what happens," he announced to the increasingly subdued galleries, "when you face someone who actually knows how to hurt things." Kess looked up from her equipment check with something approaching interest. "Your species evolved from pursuit predators, correct? Persistence hunters who exhausted prey through extended chase sequences rather than overwhelming force? Thaxor's mandibles clicked acknowledgement. We claimed our prey through superior endurance and tactical planning. Curious parallel. Kess began her circular walk around the arena perimeter, though this time her pace suggested something more purposeful than casual inspection. My species also utilized persistence hunting, though we refined the technique somewhat. How so? Kess stopped walking. For the first time since entering the arena, her expression shifted from bland neutrality to something that made the spectator galleries grow quiet. We learned to hunt things that could hunt us back. What followed defied several fundamental assumptions about combat dynamics that had governed Academy training for generations. Thaxor engaged with the calculated fury of a professional warrior, employing tactical combinations that had proven effective against every conceivable opponent. Kess dismantled him with the methodical thoroughness of someone performing routine maintenance on familiar equipment. But this time was different. This time, as Thaxor fell unconscious to the arena floor, Kess didn't return to her starting position. She stood over his motionless form, staring down with an expression that had shifted into something the spectators couldn't quite identify. "Interesting," she murmured, though her words carried clearly through the arena's acoustic systems. "I was beginning to think this might actually require effort." She looked up at the spectator galleries, her gaze sweeping across hundreds of apex predators who had suddenly discovered what prey felt like when properly hunted. Who's next? 3 hours later, silence blanketed the Nexus Combat Academy like a funeral shroud. Emergency medical units shuttled unconscious cadets to treatment facilities, while maintenance crews swept arena debris that had once been considered the galaxy's most promising warriors. The spectator galleries, previously filled with confident apex predators, now hosted scattered clusters of beings who discovered that evolutionary superiority was a more fragile concept than their species had assumed. Admiral Kethvar materialized via emergency transport, his hegemony command insignia identifying him as someone accustomed to receiving immediate answers. The Thanatari's scarred features suggested extensive combat experience, though his current expression indicated profound confusion rather than military confidence. "Situation report," he demanded, his vocalizations carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded starfleets through 3 major conflicts. Director Malthorn's compound eyes tracked rescue operations, while her segmented fingers accessed Academy databases. "Tournament concluded ahead of schedule. 296 cadets eliminated, 1 victor remaining." "Eliminated how?" "Systematically." Admiral Kethvar reviewed holographic displays that chronicled the day's events, his professional composure wavering as tactical analyses revealed information that challenged fundamental military doctrine. 9 hours of continuous combat, 296 opponents, 0 fatalities, though medical projections suggested several participants would require extensive reconstructive procedures. The human did this alone? Affirmative. Malthorn gestured toward observation screens displaying Kess in her quarters, calmly completing post-tournament documentation with the same methodical attention she applied to equipment maintenance. She requested additional opponents after eliminating the tournament roster. We declined. Additional opponents? The remaining instructors, Academy staff, and visiting dignitaries. Malthorn's multiple eyes focused independently, creating the impression of fractured attention. She appeared genuinely disappointed when we explained that Academy regulations prohibited combat between students and faculty. Admiral Kethvar stared at displays showing medical evacuation procedures that resembled battlefield triage more than academic tournament aftermath. What exactly have we been training here? An excellent question. Instructor Corvesh emerged from administrative levels, his scarred features bearing the particular expression of someone whose fundamental assumptions about reality had undergone involuntary revision. Though perhaps the more relevant inquiry concerns what we thought we understood about human military potential. The statement hung in recycled atmosphere, like an accusation. For generations, galactic powers had categorized humanity as a support species, useful for diplomatic functions, technical, specialization, and administrative tasks that required patience rather than prowess. Their representatives had consistently reinforced this assessment through peaceful conduct and collaborative approaches to interstellar relations. How many humans serve in active military positions throughout hegemony space? Admiral Kethvar inquired, his tone suggesting he'd already begun calculating disturbing implications. Malthorn's database queries produced results that would have been amusing under different circumstances. Approximately 40,000 individuals across various support functions: engineering, communications, logistics coordination, medical services. Her segmented fingers paused over holographic displays. No combat assignments? Because we assumed they lacked appropriate qualifications. Because they never requested combat assignments. The distinction carried weight that seemed to compress the observation deck's atmosphere. 40,000 humans throughout hegemony space, all carefully positioned in non-threatening roles that utilized their species' presumed advantages in cooperation and technical aptitude. None of them had ever demonstrated interest in military combat, applied for warrior training, or suggested that their species possessed relevant capabilities. Until now. Instructor Corvesh, Admiral Kethvar's vocalizations carried the formal precision of official inquiry. Explain to me how Academy sensors failed to detect enhancement technologies that could account for this human's performance. Because there weren't any. Corvesh manipulated holographic displays showing detailed scans of Kess's biology, combat performance metrics, and equipment specifications. Standard human physiology, unmodified genetics, Academy-issued training gear. She accomplished today's demonstration using nothing beyond her species' baseline capabilities. Impossible. Demonstrably possible, which suggests our intelligence regarding human military potential contains significant gaps. Admiral Kethvar reviewed tactical recordings that would soon become required viewing throughout hegemony military academies, assuming institutional pride could survive the educational experience. What do we know about Earth's current military capabilities? Virtually nothing, Malthorn admitted. Human diplomatic representatives have consistently characterized their homeworld as peaceful, technologically focused, and disinterested in external conflicts. They've never mentioned significant military infrastructure or combat-trained populations. Because we never asked the right questions. The observation deck's environmental systems struggled with atmosphere that had grown thick with implications. Earth, 11 billion humans, minimal interstellar contact, consistently underestimated by galactic powers who'd based their assessments on diplomatic representatives rather than comprehensive planetary analysis. How many other species? Instructor Corvesh inquired, with the particular emphasis reserved for questions that answered themselves. Have we categorized based on limited contact with their most cooperative members? The question resonated through administrative levels like seismic activity. 47 apex predator species, each one confident in their evolutionary superiority, had just witnessed systematic dismantling by something they'd dismissed as diplomatically useful, but militarily irrelevant. We need comprehensive intelligence regarding Earth's actual capabilities, Admiral Kethvar decided. Military assessment, population analysis, technological evaluation, combat readiness estimates. Already initiated, Malthorn replied, though initial reconnaissance suggests that Earth's defensive installations are extensive. Define extensive. Orbital platforms, surface-to-space artillery, mobile defense networks, and what appears to be a rather sophisticated early warning system. Her compound eyes processed data streams that painted increasingly uncomfortable pictures. Also, approximately 6,000 vessels of unknown classification in constant patrol patterns throughout their system. 6,000? Conservative estimate. Their stealth technology exceeds hegemony detection capabilities. Admiral Kethavar contemplated information that transformed humanity from irrelevant support species into potential existential threat. 11 billion humans, advanced military technology, defensive preparations that suggested they'd been anticipating hostile contact, and representatives who'd spent generations convincing everyone that their homeworld posed no danger to interstellar stability. "Recall all human personnel to their posts immediately," he ordered. "Standard security protocols. I want detailed psychological evaluations, capability assessments, and loyalty confirmations within 48 hours. "Already completed," Instructor Corvesh reported. "Entirely voluntary cooperation, comprehensive disclosure of personal histories, and unanimous requests to continue current assignments." He paused, reviewing data that challenged several comfortable assumptions. Also, every human in hegemony service has submitted formal recommendations for improved military training protocols. Recommendations? Detailed tactical analyses, strategic assessments, and constructive critiques of current combat doctrines. Corvesh manipulated displays showing documentation that would occupy military analysts for years. Apparently, they've been taking notes. The implications settled over assembled officials like gravitational pressure from a collapsing star. 40,000 humans, strategically positioned throughout hegemony infrastructure, all quietly observing military capabilities while maintaining facades of cooperative support staff. "Sir," Malthorn's vocalizations carried unusual urgency. "We're receiving priority communications from Earth's diplomatic corps." "Content? Congratulations on a successful tournament, formal requests for expanded academy enrollment, and invitations for reciprocal training exchanges." Her multiple eyes focused with disturbing intensity. "They're offering to send instructors." Admiral Kethavar stared through reinforced transparent aluminum at an arena where the galaxy's finest specimens had been systematically dismantled by someone who'd politely requested additional challenges. Outside, evacuation procedures continued as medical personnel addressed injuries that would require months of rehabilitation. "Accept the invitation," he decided. "Full diplomatic protocols, maximum courtesy." "Sir." "Because," Admiral Kethavar replied, watching Kess complete her paperwork with the same methodical attention she'd applied to demolishing apex predators, "I suspect we've been very fortunate that they've been feeling diplomatic." In her quarters 3 levels below, Kess sealed her final tournament report and submitted it through Academy administrative channels. The document contained tactical analyses, performance evaluations, and constructive suggestions for improving future training protocols. Professional, thorough, and written with the same cooperative spirit that had characterized human participation in galactic affairs for generations. She also included a personal note, transmitted through diplomatic channels to Earth's Colonial Relations Bureau. Assessment complete. Local military capabilities within acceptable parameters. Recommend proceeding with Phase 2 integration protocols. Then she returned to her equipment maintenance, humming softly while cleaning gear that had never actually been necessary for the demonstration. After all, she'd brought everything required. Herself.